Well, I am so happy to be in conversation with you today. Why don't we introduce ourselves? I am Professor Glenda Goodman. I'm a professor of music at the University of Pennsylvania.
Thank you so very much, Glenda, for being here. I really, really appreciate your outstanding work, and I think we share many interests, and I'm very excited to talk to you about my program and more. My name is Patricia García Gil, and I'm postdoctoral associate and artist in residence at Cornell University.
Well, let's get started. Do you want to start by talking about the composers who you chose for this program? Are there any who are your favorites?
That's such a good question. My favorite, but also a hard question. No, I don't want to be biased, but I think the most important reason of putting together all these many names, some of which anonymous, was to show the variety of the variety of genres, the variety of styles, and also the variety of backgrounds of all these women that I was able to find. Not easily, I have to say, especially the ones that belong more to the earlier part of a program, of a repertoire, because as I was mentioning, many of them could not sign under their own name. But I thought that was almost more relevant for this program than adding women who were able to. So I really made an effort to include this kind of repertoire just to show how their contributions are equally important than the ones that are being signed by name. Nevertheless, there were others that were able to, with some difficulties, of course, were able to sign by their name. For instance, Theresia de Millier or Van Hagen, they were two women composers who immigrated to the US, and they were able to secure an income by teaching. They also have to, they really had to promote themselves. I prepared these little excerpts that I wanted to read about Van Hagen because she made this advert on a newspaper, and I just wanted to read how she was able, she had the courage of doing this actually. So she said, Mrs. Van Hagen, lately from Amsterdam, respectfully informs the ladies of this city that she intends to teach the theory and practice of music on the harpsichord and pianoforte with thorough bass, if desired. Also, the principles of vocal music and singing according to the most approved method and present taste in Europe. And I just wanted to say this because imagine how they have to find a way of almost like proving their worth, right? So, and even so, these two were able to publish by name. And
Yeah.
then we also have Augusta Brown, who the piece that I chose is the Crystal Palace Waltz. And to me, this represented her involvement in international events with transatlantic ties, because this is related to this great exhibition or Crystal Palace exhibition of 1851 that happened in London, and then it was replicated in the US. But Augusta Brown, she was also very active and a self-promoter, and she was also a feminist writer, writing sometimes about, her status as a woman composer. And she also carried a very intense correspondence with many publishers, including she tried to contact Franz Liszt in Europe, although we don't have a trace of his reply. Another woman included in this program is Faustina Hodges, who also was an immigrant from England. And she was one of the first women being acknowledged by her contemporaries as a woman composer. And then we have the last part of the program. It's even more multicultural because we have Isidora Zegers from born in Madrid, but from Chile, we can say, because she moved when she was very young, and she was very, very active in the musical life of Santiago de Chile. She founded the first conservatory in the country and a philharmonic society, and then she hosted all these many international figures, including Luis Moro Gottschalk. And then she had these albums or compilations, including some of these little salon music dances that I am including in the program, in the musical program, but also correspondence, also images, drawings, and I think also some early photograph, in fact, but I might be wrong. It might be very good images. And so these binders that she collected, they are historical traces proving like there was this very bi-directional exchange between the Americas. And then we have Clara Gottschalk, who is not so well known. Unfortunately, she was the sister of Luis Moreau, and she was the one who wrote his memories and this very well-known book about his travels. It was written by her. She was also a promoter of American culture, but even she at some point she published these songs in Creole language. So she was trying to go back to a different past of America and rescuing parts of the traditions that were lost with the colonialism. And then finally we have Teresa Carreño, who also was from Latin America, from Venezuela. But she traveled widely all over the world. And of course, she came many, many times to the US. She is also connected to Gottschalk because Gottschalk was her mentor. And in fact, the piece that I include in this program is a waltz that she composed when she was only 9 years old and was published in Boston and was dedicated to her mentor.
So a prodigy. So this program is geographically really broad, and it's also chronologically pretty broad because we start in the late 18th century and possibly with these, especially the anonymous ones, and then go like almost to the 20th century. Is that right?
Correct,
So there's a
yes.
lot of different musical styles in this program. And to state the obvious, it really demonstrates that women don't compose in a particularly singular way or gendered way in one style. They really span many different genres and many different styles. Um, but they're all writing music with under the gendered expectations of their time, right? So do you find that comes out in their compositional styles? Like even though we know that there's nothing universal about women or gender, that there's still some things that are sort of socially placed on them that comes out in their music?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, yes, but also fortunately for us, because it's, again, another trace of history that is good to acknowledge and understand, and even see sometimes nowadays is still present. So, of course, throughout this long period that you mentioned, and geographically broad, even, women's participation in music was linked to their role in domestic life, especially in the US. And so the idealized, accomplished lady was expected to play music as a social grace, right? So, as such, they were praised for delicacy, modesty, more than technical or intellectual prowess. And so they were even warned to not to take music too seriously, right? Because then that would detract them from their domestic virtues. And of course, when they performed, even not only composed, they had to choose short pieces, almost to avoid annoying their company, but also to remain humble enough that they would still show these ladylike qualities, appreciated qualities. And so, as we see in this program, the preferred genres or the only genres that were accessible to them to compose and publish, especially, were variations on folk tunes, waltzes, or other dances for the ballroom. And then something very important as well, marches on nationalistic events. Because every piece that contained references to the military or to some of these very important military events like the tour that Lafayette did when he returned to the US around 1824, that would be something that they would um, I, I mean, I don't know this for sure, but I think the publishers would be much more inclined to accept that kind of composition because it was nationalistic. And so we have a lot of that, of course, in all the pieces of this program. I just and even so, it's funny that the one piece that is dedicated to Lafayette, which is a march, it's composed by a lady. So even though she was allowed to publish it because it was nationalistic, she didn't publish it under her name. So that also means a lot. And I just forgot before, there is a piece that is not by a woman in this program, and it's the first movement of Beethoven Sonata, um, Waldstein Sonata. And I've included that one on purpose because it's the only one, obviously, that is not one of these, ballroom genre or military or short piece, salon-like piece. And this is because I wanted to emphasize, in the case of Teresa Carreño, and this is why it's towards the end of a program before her piece, I wanted to emphasize that performing pieces like this from the European repertoire, canonical repertoire, especially German-centric, becomes at some point towards obviously the late 19th century a way of framing herself as serious performer, and it's almost like a statement of authority. And Teresa Carreño recorded even this Waldstein Sonata, among other pieces, on a Velte Mignon piano roll recording. And I think in her hands, this music is not just repertoire, it becomes part of this transnational language through which a woman performing claims the concert stage.
Mm.
And so this is also very related to the formation of a canon at this time, right? So it's women many times who, perhaps because of this way of having to establish themselves through serious repertoire, they are actually contributing to the creation of a canon that is male-centric. And so I wanted to include this piece in my own statement of, just being aware of this part of history.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good reminder that these women, who are all incredibly remarkable, lived in a period where they were always going to be the less powerful part of the population. I mean, as women generally continue to be. Um, and that, with the exception of, I guess, Augusta Brown, this like actual feminist writer, we don't know if any of these women actually believed in any sort of feminist um, concepts that we would recognize today. Just because they were women didn't mean they thought women should be equal to men. But they certainly achieved a lot. One of the things that really struck me just now, listening to you talk about the different genres they were writing in, is just, and I think you said this, just how socially useful each of these genres is. Like, none of them are abstract genres, and there's no sonata that exists as art in and of itself. It's something that could be used to entertain or to dance to or to promote patriotism. And that really lines up with something that I was struck by in your program notes, where you write about hospitality and these different sort of social roles that women were playing in their lives, especially women who maybe had servants who could take care of all the other work that had to happen.
Mhm.
Um, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about Clara Gottschalk Peterson too, because a lot of the sort of social care work that she was doing was on behalf of her brother, who it seems like kind of overshadowed her. I mean, definitely overshadowed her. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what you find remarkable in her career.
Yes, no, absolutely. So, oh, well, first of all, I also did not know anything about her. Whereas I obviously knew about Luis Moreau. And I say obviously because this is what you get. Everyone speaks about him, but no one really speaks about her. And that already struck me as something wrong when I realized that she was the one who wrote the book. And I'm trying to remember the name of the book because I mean the book is great, but it's all about his anecdotes and but no one knows really because it appears on the front page that she's the one who writes it, but it's just so small that is almost impossible to see it. And
This is the book that's like, so he's a famous touring pianist and composer in the 19th century, right? And so this is the book
yeah,
of like his anecdotes from his experiences going around the whole hemisphere. Is that right?
that is right.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to find, give me 1 second because I want to
Sure.
mention the name of a book. Um, Maybe they will edit this
I'm, I'm sure.
and get it down. Oh, that's it. Notes of a Pianist. Okay. It was so easy, but I couldn't remember. So yes, sorry, just going back, Notes of a Pianist is the book that accounts of all the travels that Louis Moreau Gottschalk did. And these are written by Clara. So to me, that was very interesting because basically she is also deciding what to write and what not to write. Okay, so again, she's participating in this formation of a canon, in this case, literary, and deciding what is going to sell, probably, but also what is proper. Because you can tell that some of the things are maybe longer stories. So, so I just thought that was very, very interesting. Then another contribution by her, it's what I mentioned before, these Creole language songs that were something that no one had done before, trying to recover a language that was not English, right? And so from those two things, I was really impressed about her. But then she also composed, and we don't really know if she composed many pieces for the piano. We know of the songs, right, which are for a singer, and I think with piano accompaniment. But then I could only find two pieces for piano solo. One of them is included in the program, and they're again very short and light hearted, really cute, really fun to play as well, and about these fantastic creatures, right? The pixies. And so we don't know if she would have composed more I don't want to say serious repertoire because I don't want to be here making that difference. That is something that I wanted to emphasize in this program. What I'm trying to do is to present, yes, different genres, different or the common genres with their differences, but also all this music as a continuum because and this is why it's geographically and historically broad because nothing was separated as we tend to see it. Even the difference between public and private was probably much more fluid than scholarship has tended to acknowledge. Um, and in the case of salons like that of Isidora Cegers, I mean, what is private when this is all sometimes like there are notices on journals about it,
Mhm.
and so even if it's her home it's very public, and all these virtuosos coming to the city know about it,
Yeah.
right? So it's really when you put it that way, much more fluid, then it tells you more about the importance of these many roles of women, not only as composers, but also as hosts, as patrons, even at the home, entertaining their kids with music at the piano, right? Because and that is the other point, the piano as a way of socializing, right? So to use it as the center of this social life, whether we want to call it private or public, or more like I see it, more fluid, the piano is important in that way.
Yeah.
And especially towards the later years, it reaches more people. And it's as an instrument that, of course, is still a symbol of status. It's not that everyone has a piano. You have to have certain privileges to be able to dedicate yourself to music, even if it's not professionally. But it's something that probably unifies a little more the roles of women and men because women have some agency to play it and to communicate through it. Um, Yet not saying
Yeah.
that,
And
you know.
maybe that's something we could pick up on more, actually, the sort of powerful role some of these women played, especially Isadora Zegers, whose name I'm probably not pronouncing correctly, but people who exercised considerable power in their social milieu, right? Who by running these salons, and that was something that really stands out to me on this program is that all of this music, first of all, not all of it would have been is conceivably considered to be indoor private music. Something like the March for Lafayette could be presumably sort of is meant to conjure at least the idea of like outdoor announcements of someone's arrival. But a lot of this music is meant for various kinds of domestic settings, but they are just not all the same kind of domestic settings, right? And in the US, at least, when we say something like parlor songs, the tendency for anyone who knows what a parlor song is to begin with, which isn't everybody, but the tendency is to picture something that is small, intimate, domestic in the sense of family, and maybe even what we now consider like a nuclear family, and not um, whose like other family corollaries would be like the father reading from the Bible or something like that, that those are the kinds of associations. And that by having the hemispheric, especially the hemispheric range of your um, program, you're really introducing us to lots of other kinds of technically domestic settings, but like a salon that is just as you say, like it really blurs the line between private and public. It is announced in newspapers. People can try to get in. They know that it's happening. It's much more akin to a big sort of genteel party, right? With the entertainment that you could buy tickets to, or could you buy tickets to salons? Is that okay?
So in the case of Isidora's salon, I'm
Mhm.
not I don't know,
Okay.
but I know definitely certainly in England at this same time and before some of these salons that we've been calling private were ticketed.
Yeah.
So
So what does that even mean? I mean, you have to be at a certain social station and race and class to get in, but to buy a ticket. But maybe you could talk more about these different kinds of settings and help us imagine what this music would have meant to the composers, what they were trying to achieve with it, in these different settings.
mhm. Well, yes, no, this is such an interesting topic, and we could be speaking about it for hours. So even the piece you mentioned for Lafayette, that little march, I think it's interesting to note something else. Basically, yes, it is composed by a lady without a name, but that means something else. That means there's no copyright, so it circulates. It can technically, potentially circulate freely. And so many other probably ladies will have access to it and play it because I think every single person related to some sort of high social class would be willing to celebrate Lafayette, and demonstrate how they know how to play music and they have a piano at home. There were piano companies making pianos specifically for that date as well, for the
Mm.
tour of Lafayette in the US. So he was received like like the king of I don't know, the world.
What did those
So
pianos look like? Do you know? How were those Lafayette pianos marketed? What did they look like?
yeah. So, well, I some of them would look very much like one that I'm using. That is the
Mhm.
Gype piano that you will be able to see on the recording labeled as William Gybe, written Geib.
Mm.
And they were just like many other American pianos. They all look pretty big in comparison to European ones. And I'm using, this is perhaps related somehow, or maybe I'm anticipating a next question, but I just want to mention all the pianos I'm using are square shaped. And this is because that is the kind of piano that you would have as the center of a parlor. And again, talking about the parlor in this indoor but also outward instrument that allows you to connect with specific events that are happening, maybe in your city, but or maybe in a nearby one. Sometimes another genre that I'm not including, but is very common, is the battle music. So they would use these pianos to play these accounts of a battle, especially around, the Civil War. And and that, in a way, it's also something very interesting, perhaps for another program, because that music is not gentle at all,
Mhm.
but still it would be performed by women. You have these covers with women performing that for children,
Oh.
and it's really not ladylike, because obviously they want to represent the cannons, the wounded, the all these very dramatic events of a battle. And so the piano gets banged by a woman, right? So it's like another form of agency. And perhaps this is for another program, and I'm getting far from your question, but I think the all these pieces have their own little connotations.
Mm.
In the case of the even the piece Carreño's Waltz, dedicated to Gottschalk, and that she composed when she was so little, um, it's a salon piece, but it's virtuosic. So it's also showing that when she's 9 years old, she can play all these fat scales, leaps, and it's pretty showy, So it's a salon piece. It's modest because it's for her mentor, but it's pretty much a piece that you could include in a concert program, maybe as a piece, just
Mm.
because it's a little shorter than many other pieces. But especially if she was performing Beethoven sonata, the Waldstein sonata, which is like 25 minutes.
Mhm.
So I don't know if I'm replying or
Yeah,
should.
it's well, it's interesting. I mean, to think about how the constraints placed that these composers operated within, the cultural constraints and the instruments constraints um, did not fully box them in. So even within those, you might, as you say, you expect a woman at the keyboard to play gently, charmingly, without a lot of dazzling display of virtuosity, but that's not always the case. They're that's not uniformly held to. And I love the idea of, mothers at the keyboard playing, banging out the sound of cannon fire for their children. I can totally understand why that would be useful to entertain children as you're trying to find something to do with them during the non-school, non-working hours. And one thing you mentioned about the square pianos that really helps sort of get at the question of like these different spaces they were in, the salon, the parlor, is that a square piano is not a piano that is just pushed against the wall, right? It's not, it is, as you said, it's in the center. It's um it's almost as important as the family hearth, right? It is the centerpiece. And I think that also understanding it as furniture also helps us visualize and get that this is not side entertainment. It might be diminished, spoken of in diminishing ways, but it is actually what people were coming to listen to. Um, so maybe you could tell us more about the instruments that you're playing on, how you came to find them, what you like about them, anything you want to share.
Of course, yes. No, that's such a good point that the square piano, even though there is a direction of a lead that you can open or not,
Mhm.
it allows for people to be around pretty much, and you don't necessarily need to open it because it's a beautiful furniture. It's beautiful at the time they are. I mean, there are differences, and you will be able to appreciate them in the four different pianos that I'm using, but they are all pretty much fashionable furniture. So ornamented and kind of like massive, like you mentioned before, because they embody also prosperity, right? So um, I think maybe I should talk a little bit about the builders of the pianos that I'm using because they all also have obviously they came from other countries. They came from Europe, some from Germany, some from England. And just as a parenthesis, this is also something that I wanted to emphasize in this program because I think that is still pretty much present in the US culture, this real exchange and cosmopolitanism and mix of culture coming from many different countries. Through movement between Europe, but also Latin America, the Caribbean, and um, and this way of assembling culture through circulation, translation, and exchange, right? And then how women were central to that process. And of course, I will speak about four male builders, but I want to acknowledge that it's very likely that many of both the um, secretarial work, like financial work behind a piano business, but also the ornate work. So making decorations, making sometimes these pianos have textiles in them, making all kinds of things related to the piano, or even little parts for them might have well been done by women. Okay. So that is something that I want to acknowledge before even mentioning these other, the builders. The builders who many times were just the big name of a firm, right? And then the piano itself is made by the people working for the firm. But so the first piano I'm using, it's a Nunn piano. And this is the Nunn family settled in New York in 1824, also coinciding with the Lafayette tour. Um, and they obviously they brought this world of European piano making, and I think also these transfers, which were obviously not only about instruments, but they became really like they really connected taste as well, not only with Europe, not only they were bringing objects, but I think it's all related to the aesthetics and the taste. This piano is from the collection in Hunter, New York, at the Piano Performance Museum that is part of the Catskill Mountain Foundation. Another one that I'm using is a Hazelton Brothers built around 1850. And this is from the Cornell Center for Historical Keyboards collection. This one has these elements of Gothic and Empire Revival furniture style, which of course embodies the 18th century domestic decorative life and music making. And this one is pretty robust. I mean, the nuns as well, but this one is really one of the big ones. It's in fact called, I think, like a square grand. Another one that I'm using, always from the Catskill, excuse me, the Piano Performance Museum. It's a young guy who came from Germany to England and then to the US. And the firm patented a very ingenious escapement for square piano. So this is something that perhaps is not so well known about Guy, but was like a very, very important firm doing a lot of innovations in piano making. And some of them perhaps then traveling back to Europe.
Mm.
So that is also interesting that it's sometimes we see this bi-directional exchange. And then finally, the last piano that I'm using, the fourth piano in the last part of a program for this continuum between Chile and the south of the US and Venezuela. It's a Steinway piano,
Mm.
but it's a square Steinway. In Steinway also emigrated from Europe, right? In fact, it was Steinweg,
Mhm.
written like that, the last name of a family. So they came from Germany around 1850, and they also settled in New York. And we all know about Steinway, so there's not much that I have to say. But I chose it because it also represents this connection to the concert stage, right? So I mean, not the one in particular that I was using, because as I said, is a square. So that's again in the middle, right? In this liminal space between private and public, but obviously a Steinway as a piano making firm is still very much connected to a big concert stage, right? So I thought this would be very appropriate for all these figures in the last part of the program that are also connected to Louis Moreau Gottschalk, and who probably performed on Steinway pianos when they did their concerts, especially thinking of Teresa Carreño.
Hmm. When you're playing these different instruments, do you have to adjust your technique a lot? Like, what is it like to sort of warm up to the different instruments? Because they do sound quite diverse.
Yes. The good thing is that I'm very lucky to live always in these collections,
Mm.
because since I started playing for the piano, I've been keen on visiting many different collections and playing on as many different instruments as possible. And now, of course, as artist in residence at Cornell, I'm lucky to have them all the time with me. I live there basically. And so one gets used to this adjustment, right? But I have to say, this is the very first time that I perform on so many American built pianos, and they are very different from European pianos. And I also want to acknowledge the technicians that put them in perfect condition for me, because these pianos are tricky. So I'm going to acknowledge Ken Walkup from Cornell, and I'm going to acknowledge Richard Hester from the Piano Performance Museum. And I also want to add Thomas Strange from the Seagull Museum, where they have a lot of square pianos as well, and also grand American pianos. I didn't record any of this there, but I got a lot of information on these piano builders from Thomas Strange, the curator of that museum. So I just want to say thank you to all of them. Yes, this even between the four pianos, it's kind of different. But what you have to do is really create a dialogue with the piano. So rather than trying to impose your own version, you just hear how the piano sounds and then try to make it work with the piece that you want to play, and what are you going to be able to use from that piano, from that voice, right? And then it kind of works.
Mm.
So,
Hmm.
yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, this is such a collaborative project. Given that it is a solo recital, you clearly are drawing on such a wide-ranging musical and professional and cultural network to put it all together. So it's just another way in which it sort of makes sense with the program itself because all of these women are so networked in. Even the ones who are anonymous must have had some connections, at least in music publishing, to be able to have their works published. So it really shows that even when it's just one person on stage, there's lots of people who are helping to make that happen. Are there any other topics you want to talk about?
I think that was such a nice way to wrap it up, and including this conversation,
Yeah.
and hopefully more to come out of it, more interesting conversations that I'm sure all these women had as well, just
Mm.
thinking about their world, their music, their role, their pianos. And yes, I think this is wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes, just thank you to Suzanne as well to put us in
Yeah.
contact.
No, I really hope that the women had other women they got to talk with about what they were doing. I hope they had musical friends, you know? Okay, I will stop recording.